For nearly 3 decades, I was the family ghost. They'd look right through me at Christmas dinner and ask me to step out of family photos. Then my grandmother died, and her will didn't just make me visible, it made me the only thing they could see. I inherited everything. And suddenly, the family that treated me like furniture wanted to treat me like a king. But they had no idea I was holding a secret that would burn their world to the ground. For 28 years, I was a ghost at my own family's gatherings, a phantom occupying a chair they were forced to set but preferred to ignore. I was the black sheep, the cautionary tale, the spectral presence they navigated around on their way to more important conversations with more important people. At every holiday dinner, every birthday party, every milestone celebration, I was a masterclass in invisibility. My cousins, paragons of mediocrity, were showered with praise for the most mundane of accomplishments. Theo's promotion to a junior associate at a mid-tier law firm was cause for a champagne toast. Ava's acceptance into a state-level political internship warranted a gushing, multi-paragraph announcement in the family's annual Christmas letter. Meanwhile, I could have single-handedly brokered world peace, and my mother would still have leaned over to Aunt Veronica and whispered, "I do wish he'd get a real job." My Aunt Veronica was a particular artist of the snub. She had perfected the ability to physically step around my body to embrace the person standing directly behind me, a maneuver of such calculated dismissal. It was almost impressive. My Uncle Randall, a man whose pride in his children was his entire personality, would hold court at dinner parties, introducing his progeny to anyone who would listen. "This is my brilliant nephew, Theo, already making waves as a doctor, and this is my beautiful daughter, Ava, a future powerhouse lawyer." He would boom, his chest puffed out like a proud peacock. His eyes would then glaze over as they passed my spot, a flicker of nothing. It wasn't even disdain. It was a complete lack of recognition, as if I were a coat rack or a piece of unremarkable furniture. This would happen while I was standing right beside him, often holding an expensive bottle of wine I'd brought, a silent offering to the gods of family acceptance that was never received. It always had to be expensive wine. A lesson I learned the hard way after a cheap bottle one year was used as a punchline for the rest of the evening. My cardinal sin, the act that had excommunicated me from the family's circle of acceptable professions, was dropping out of law school. I had been on the prescribed path, following in the footsteps of a long line of Patterson lawyers and bankers. But in my second year, surrounded by dusty torts and the drone of monotone professors, I realized I was suffocating. I left to start a tech company, a venture that, in their archaic worldview, was akin to running away to join the circus. The fact that my company, CloudSync Solutions, was not just surviving but actively thriving, pulling in seven-figure annual revenues and employing a growing team, was an inconvenient truth they chose to ignore. I wasn't a doctor, a lawyer, or a banker. Therefore, in the rigid, unforgiving social hierarchy of my family, I simply did not count. "Oh, Quinn's just going through a bit of a phase," my own mother would say, with a dismissive wave of her hand when a distant relative dared to ask about my life. "He'll come to his senses and finish that law degree eventually." She said this at my cousin's wedding, 7 years after I had landed my first million-dollar client. I had stopped trying to impress them, truly stopped, after my master's degree ceremony. I had earned a Master of Science in Computer Science from a prestigious university, a degree I completed while simultaneously working 60-hour weeks to get my startup off the ground. I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA. It was, by any objective measure, a significant achievement. I posted a photo in the family group chat, me beaming in my cap and gown, holding my diploma. The response was a deafening, crushing silence. For 3 days, not a single person commented. No congratulations, no thumbs-up emoji, nothing. A week later, my cousin Finn, a pleasant but ambitionless young man, was promoted to assistant manager at a boutique coffee shop. His new role came with a princely salary of $12 an hour. The group chat erupted. There were 47 messages of effusive congratulations, 3 competing invitations for a celebration dinner, and a coordinated effort to buy him a gold watch to commemorate his new status as the successful businessman of the family. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. At that point, I had a payroll of 15 employees. My invisibility was a constant, humiliating presence. At Christmas, I would be relegated to the kids' table, a 28-year-old man seated between a 7-year-old who still believed in Santa Claus and an empty high chair. At weddings, I became the unofficial, unpaid photographer. "Quinn, could you grab a shot of us?" they'd ask, handing me their phones as they arranged themselves for a family photo, a group for which I was explicitly excluded. I was a utility, not a member. Conversations would flow around and through me as if I were a ghost. Whatever happened with Quinn's little computer project? Aunt Veronica would ask my mother, while I was sitting 3 feet away, nursing a beer and trying to project an aura of detached amusement. Oh, my mother would sigh, he's still tinkering with that website thing. My website thing had just secured a long-term data management contract with a Fortune 500 company, but details like that only muddied their preferred narrative of my failure. Yet, I kept showing up. A pathetic, hopeful part of me, a part one despised, clung to the fantasy that this time would be different. This time they would see me. They never did. And then, my grandmother Iris died. She was the one exception, the single quiet dissenter in the family's consensus of my worthlessness. For the last 6 years of her life, she had lived at Sunset Manor, a sprawling, antiseptic care facility that always smelled of lemon-scented disinfectant and quiet despair. She was a chore to the rest of the family, a financial obligation, and a biannual phone call to be checked off a list. Aunt Veronica visited her twice in 5 years, both times to inquire about the status of her will. Uncle Randall sent a generic bouquet of flowers on her birthday, but could never remember which of his grandchildren he was supposed to be asking about. But for me, she was a destination. Every Tuesday, at 6 o'clock sharp, I would walk through the sliding glass doors of Sunset Manor, carrying a small cooler with the homemade chocolate chip cookies she loved, the recipe she had taught me herself during long, sun-drenched summers at her house when I was a boy. The staff knew me. Quinn's here for Mrs. Patterson. The receptionist would announce over the intercom, a genuine warmth in her voice. The nurses treated me with a kindness and respect my own family never bothered to show. They'd give me detailed updates on her health, ask about my latest project at work, and remember details about my life my own mother had long since forgotten. With them, I was a devoted grandson. With my family, I was a disappointment. Tell me about the cloud storage thing again, Grandmother Iris would say, her gnarled, arthritic hands moving a chess piece with a surprising, deliberate grace. We played every week, and as we played, I would explain it all, the complexities of server infrastructure, my strategies for client acquisition, the challenges of scaling the business. And she would listen, really listen. Her eyes, clouded with age but still sharp as a hawk's, would light up with genuine interest. She asked intelligent, insightful questions that showed she not only heard me, but understood me. She said one evening, leaning back in her worn recliner, I built the family construction business from the ground up back in '52. Your grandfather and I, we just had one old pickup truck and a lot of nerve. A mischievous smile played on her lips. Everyone told me a woman couldn't run a construction company. Prove them all wrong. Didn't I? These were stories she never shared with the others. At family gatherings, she was a quiet, almost peripheral figure. But with me, she was a titan, a pioneer, a woman who had shattered expectations in an era when women were expected to have none. You remind me of me, at your age, she told me once, as her knight captured my bishop in a clever, unexpected move. Too stubborn to listen to doubters, and too smart to fail. She was the only one. When I landed the contract that would secure my company's future, a 3-year, multi-million-dollar deal, she was the only person in the family I told the details to. That's empire-building money, Quinn, she had said, her hand gripping mine with a surprising, wiry strength. Don't you ever let them convince you it's anything less. When she passed, I was the one holding that hand. The rest of the family was celebrating Cousin Theo's engagement at a lavish party at the country club, an event to which I was not invited. I learned of my grandmother's death from a sterile, impersonal group text from my mother. Grandma, Iris passed this afternoon. Funeral arrangements TBD. No call, no compassion, just a broadcast notification. When her lawyer, Mr. Morrison, called to schedule the will reading, I almost declined. The thought of another family event, another opportunity to be marginalized and humiliated, was exhausting. But Morrison was insistent. Mrs. Patterson was very specific. He said, a note of urgency in his voice. She made it clear that your presence was not optional. The law office of Morrison and Associates was a cathedral of old money, all dark mahogany, worn leather, and the hushed reverence of immense wealth. The family had gathered like a flock of well-dressed vultures, their grief a transparently thin veneer over their avaricious excitement. Aunt Veronica had brought a leather-bound portfolio, complete with colored tabs, ready to categorize her expected inheritance. Uncle Randall was already discussing capital gains taxes with his wife, debating the merits of selling the mansion versus renting it out. Cousin Ava was scrolling through the websites for luxury car dealerships on her phone. They all assumed the estate, worth a staggering $20 million, would be divided equally. The mansion, the investment portfolios, the construction business, even split 12 ways, it was a life-changing windfall for everyone. I took my customary seat in a forgotten corner of the room and watched them mentally spend money that wasn't yet theirs. Mr. Morrison cleared his throat and began to read. I, Iris Elizabeth Patterson, being of sound mind and body, the standard legalese washed over the room. Then he paused. To my beloved family, I leave you exactly what you have given me in my final years. A confused murmur rippled through the room. Veronica, stop her note-taking. To my daughter, Veronica, who visited me twice in 5 years and forgot my last 3 birthdays, I leave my profound disappointment and my best wishes. The silence was instantaneous and absolute. Veronica's face drained of all color. There must be some mistake, she stammered. Morrison continued, his voice an implacable monotone. To my son, Randall, who sent flowers once a year but could not remember the names of his own grandchildren during our phone calls, I leave my deep sadness at your priorities and the hope that you one day learn the value of presence over presence. He read on, disinheriting each of my cousins with a cold, surgical precision, leaving them nothing but her disappointment. The air in the room grew thick with shock and outrage. Finally, he came to my name. To my grandson, Quinn, who held my hand every Tuesday for 6 years, who remembered my birthday not with a store-bought card but with homemade cookies, who listened to my stories and shared his dreams, who was the only one among you who saw a person instead of a bank account. To Quinn, I leave everything else. Everything else. The mansion, the stocks, the construction business, $20 million. The room erupted into a cacophony of disbelief and fury. This is absurd, Veronica shrieked, her composure shattering. She was clearly senile. We'll contest this, Randall roared, his face a blotchy, alarming shade of crimson. This is elder abuse. Amidst the chaos, Morrison handed me a thick, sealed envelope. Inside, in my grandmother's familiar, elegant script, was a letter. My dear Quinn, it began, if you are reading this, the vultures have gathered. I'm sure they are shocked, but you should not be. You are the only one. They will come for you now, my boy. They will try every trick in the book. Be ready. The letter went on, detailing the location of business records in a basement safe, the combination, my birthday, in reverse, and hinted at certain unpaid family loans that I might find interesting. Morrison, a stoic island in a sea of familial rage, finally raised a hand for silence. Mrs. Patterson anticipated this reaction, he said calmly. He opened another file, revealing a stack of recent medical evaluations, cognitive assessments, and signed affidavits from psychiatrists. Your mother was extensively tested for mental competency in the last 6 months of her life. She was, by every medical standard, of perfectly sound mind. He then delivered the final, devastating blow. Furthermore, she has stipulated that any attempt to legally contest this shall result in the immediate and public release of certain financial records she maintained, records that document unpaid loans, questionable business dealings, and certain tax irregularities that she believed the IRS might find illuminating. The fight drained out of them in an instant. They were not defeated by a sense of justice or familial love, but by the cold, hard reality of blackmail from a grave. I walked out of that office a multimillionaire, clutching the secrets that could utterly destroy the people who had spent my entire life trying to diminish me. The barrage began before I even reached my car. My phone, silent for months, lit up with a flood of notifications. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. Aunt Veronica, Quinn, honey, we must talk. Family dinner at my house tonight, 7 p.m. sharp. Uncle Randall, hey buddy, long time no see. Let's grab coffee tomorrow, my treat. Gu xin tao, gongat, mang. So proud. We should celebrate. Drinks on me. It was a sudden, dizzying pivot from complete indifference to suffocating attention. I went to the dinner. I had to see it for myself. When I walked through the door for the first time in my life, every head turned. They were all looking at me. Veronica practically tackled me with a hug, her expensive perfume cloying and artificial. Quinn, you look wonderful. I've been meaning to ask about your company. It sounds fascinating. They ushered me to the head of the table, a seat I had never been allowed to occupy, the seat of honor, the seat of power. The revisionist history began immediately. Theo was suddenly waxing poetic about my childhood genius, conveniently forgetting the time he had smashed a computer I had built from spare parts because he thought it was a waste of time. My mother claimed she had always known my computer thing would be a success. It was a masterclass in sycophantic, self-serving delusion. Then came the pitch. "We're worried about you, Quinn," Veronica said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Handling such a large inheritance, it's a tremendous burden." Ava, the lawyer, produced a pre-prepared folder. "We were thinking of family trust," she suggested, spreading legal documents across the table. "We could pool the inheritance, manage it together for everyone's benefit." There it was. The reason for the fawning, the fake hugs, the seat at the head of the table. They wanted to manage my money right into their own pockets. "Grandmother Iris would have wanted us to share," Veronica said, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. I let them finish. I let them lay out their entire, pathetic, transparent scheme. Then I smiled. "You're absolutely right," I said, and watched their faces light up with greedy relief. Families should stick together. I pulled out my phone. In fact, I've been learning so much about this family. For years, I've been recording our conversations. The color drained from Veronica's face. The wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. "I have a particularly clear recording from last Christmas," I said calmly, "where you refer to me as a basement-dwelling loser who will never amount to anything. Would you like to hear it?" I scrolled through the audio files. Or perhaps this one, from Uncle Randall, explaining his theory that I must be autistic because I can't take a hint. Or my personal favorite, from Ava, explaining to her friends why I'm not allowed in family photos, something about not wanting to be associated with a family embarrassment. I pressed play. Veronica's own voice, sharp and dismissive, filled the silent room. "He's just so awkward and honestly a little pathetic. Still playing with computers at his age." I stopped the recording. I stood up from the head of the table. "For 6 years," I said, my voice low and steady, "I watched my grandmother wait by the door for one of you to visit. I made excuses for you. I told her you were busy. But she knew. She wasn't stupid. She knew she had been abandoned. We made mistakes," Randall stammered, his desperation palpable. "We can change. We're family." "You're right," I said, pausing at the door. "We are family. And so, I'm giving you exactly what you gave me and what you gave her for all those years." I looked at each of their horrified, pleading faces. Nothing. The legal challenges they mounted were as predictable as they were pathetic. They were swiftly dismantled by the mountain of evidence my grandmother and I had, in our own ways, been compiling for years. The videos of our chess games, her mind sharp and clear, eviscerated their claims of her incompetence. The testimony of the nursing home staff painted a damning picture of their neglect. Their legal battles cost them money they didn't have, and one by one, their carefully constructed lives of illusion began to crumble. Veronica's McMansion was foreclosed on. Randall's restaurant, which had been propped up by loans he had expected the inheritance to cover, went bankrupt. Theo's fiancée left him, her love apparently contingent on a net worth he no longer possessed. A year later, I ran into Ava in a coffee shop. She was a ghost of her former self, exhausted, humbled, and for the first time, honest. She cried, not the performative tears of the will-reading, but the raw, ugly tears of genuine regret. "We were jealous," she confessed. "You built something real while we were all just playing a part. We punished you for being the person we were all too lazy and scared to be." It was the first real apology I had ever received from any of them. I bought her a coffee. 6 months later, she was the only family member I invited to my wedding. The others saw the photos online. Their attempts to reconnect were transparent and pathetic. I ignored them. Today, the Patterson Mansion is no longer a monument to a family's dysfunction. It's the Iris Patterson Community Center, a place that provides technology education and small business resources to underprivileged kids. Kids like I was, with big dreams but little support. The construction business is thriving, and its profits fund a foundation in my grandmother's name. I didn't need their forgiveness, and I certainly didn't need them. I had found my own family, my own flock. The black sheep, it turns out, was a wolf all along.